just when you think cinema couldn't get any greater. When we all seem to have reached the limits of our imagination by bringing dinosaurs back to life and blowing up a man-made planet destroyer with a giant floating pizza. I've got you one better. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Gregg Araki.
I saw you, it was like deja
vu. Oh boy, you don't know how long I've been waiting to talk about this guy, but I'm also kind of nervous considering that, well, with every single one of his movies like tackling some very similar subjects, talking about Gregg Araki feels a little one-sided because I love the guy, but I don't think he loves me back. It's kind of looking at one of those music album covers. On the one side of the coin, you get some of the most pristine, beautiful looking pieces of art that any human being could ever muster up. And on the other side, you get something like this. Nobody wants to look at this. Look, I've been waiting for months to get to this point, so I'll keep it short and sweet. Same rules as per usual, meaning no short films, but I am going to be making 2 exceptions for 2 of the feature films on this list. Consider them honorable mentions, if you will. This is the rhythm of the... I don't think I've ever done one of these before. If I have to be in the utmost of my honesty here, Free Bewildered People and Long Weekend of Despair aren't on the list. I don't know why, I just think it's a little unfair to put them near the bottom if I did, especially since they're both essentially student films. With that said, both of them are pretty good technical achievements in guerrillas filmmaking and discussing the topics of queer acceptance and the psychology of a 90s teen. The last 2 in which Araki himself would do a lot better in his later projects. So yeah, the only reason I'm giving these 2 an honorable mention is simply out of goodwill, even though the story could get a little clunky sometimes.
Did somebody say boom?
Here you go, the last place spot on this list. I am really not looking forward to talking about this one. I just want to come right out of the gate by saying that this was the most disappointed I've been in a film in a very long time. I mean, that can't be too hard to make, right? One of Gregg Araki's favorite things to do in any of his movies is hinting at the rapture, so why not make a movie where the world literally blows up? And yes, that is exactly the name of it. The movie literally wants to go out with a bang. And I can't really say that it's an entirely bad movie either. The acting's pretty good, the dialogue as always is pretty fun, and I usually love it when his movies go the extra mile with their weirdness, so why is it just the most nothing movie I've ever seen? And after a few minutes of thought, I think I figured out the answer. And maybe it's because Kaboom is literally just the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy again, except it's painted in college colors and has even less of a direction than last time. It feels very all over the place, and just when you think it's starting to go somewhere, the film stops without any sort of fanfare. And I want to see where a story like this would go. There are a lot of fun ideas here, and I don't think any of them are fleshed out as well because, again, we've done this already. On the nihilism side of things, I don't think there's anything left to explore. Which is why, this is an absolute tongue twister. Which is why White Bird of the Blizzard felt like a completely different tone compared to his other films, and why people weren't all that welcoming towards it. Also, I know she's supposed to play this sort of cynical goth girl, but I'm sorry, Haley Bennett sounds bored throughout most of this. I don't know how she was able to be so deadpan that it makes her sound like she's sleepwalking for the whole thing. And she's not a bad actress at all. I've seen her in movies like Magnificent Seven, Hardcore Henry, and even that god-awful Borderlands movie, and she was perfectly fine. But here, she sounds like me first thing in the morning.
Could be because there's more to Lorelei than meets the eye.
What. What do you mean?
She's a witch.
What?
I can't really bring myself to say that Kaboom is a bad movie per se, but in the context of the rest of Gregg Araki's movies, it just feels like a massive step back. Like, come on, James Duval is only in this movie for like 5 minutes. Wasn't he the lead in one of your best movies? Give him some more stuff to do, like, come on!
Okay, Google, fuck my ass!
Weirdly enough, I thought this was Araki's first feature film when I first saw it, but it's apparently his sophomore film, because there was another one that came out a year before it. Can you really blame me for that? Totally
Fucked up.
Definitely has first feature film energy. A lot of it is very unfocused, going as far as for the majority of the movie to be filmed on a bunch of camcorders. Most of the movie looks like Dark's video diary, The End of Nowhere. Wait a minute. Yeah, this film marks the beginning of the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy, a series of films whose entire goal is to portray the consequences of teenage angst in the 90s. An admirable goal, to say the least, but spoiler alert, they would be done a lot better in the 2 other films in the series. But it still has hits! As a matter of fact, this was the first instance of Araki using shoegaze and post-punk music to morph a more dreamlike feel to his projects, preferably from bands like Slowdive and the Jesus and Mary Chain. And this was also the first big screen debut of James Duval, who would go on to be in most other Gregg Araki movies afterwards, and would even end up in films like Gone in 60 Seconds, Independence Day, and even played the role of Frank the Rabbit in Donnie freaking Darko. That's one hell of a resume. It's also apparently meant to be a found footage film. You might want to come back to me on that one, at least I can actually see the actors here.
I have no idea what to get her. Trisha is so hard to shop for.
The main problem I have with this movie is that it's paced very awkwardly. I know that this is supposed to be like an anthology film in a way, 15 short segments following several different people, but I feel like there's very little of a story to it. At least with the other Teenage Apocalypse films, there's at least a clear motivation even if they are paper thin. Here, it's just nothing. A very honest nothing, I can give it that, but at the same time, yeah, it's nothing. It follows several teens with different sexual preferences, going on several tangents for 70 minutes until one of them ends up dying for no reason, and that's about it. That's where the film ends. Actually, scratch that, it just stops. There's no closure, there's no actual epilogue, it just stops. So though I can admire how the film got made in the first place, according to Araki himself, the movie was made with virtually no crew, practically no budget, and had to make most of the movie guerrilla style because they weren't able to get any filming permits. I'm surprised that it was even filmed at all, but hey, it did get Araki the job of directing a few episodes of that Jeffrey Dahmer series with a terrible name, so I guess anything is possible. It's kind of given me the confidence to direct my own movie. You know, ones that aren't weird abstract art house projects. Oh, okay, they can be weird art house films. You know, as a treat.
I'm cold out here, Daddy. I'm cold.
Okay, before we continue, a fun thing to mention about Araki as a director is that most of what he comes out with isn't immediately praised. They have a brief run in either a festival or a small release in theaters, receiving less than stellar reviews up to when it's out of theaters, and years later will be seen as a cult classic. A little redundant to explain considering what most of his movies is about, but I am interested into seeing if that trend ends up continuing once I Want Your Sex comes out. Almost every single one of his movies have gotten some form of reappraisal over the coming years. The White Bear and the Blizzard never did. Being his most recent movie at the time of this project, White Bird and a Blizzard didn't receive the warmest welcome when it first came out in 2014, and I can kind of see why, but at the same time, it's not nearly as bad as what people have been saying about it. It is visually interesting, and Woodley and Maloney do give off solid enough performances. I will admit that I'm a little behind in my article readings, mainly because it just depresses me the more I look at them, but I'm presuming that this was supposed to be Araki's take on the works of David Lynch, which would make sense since he has gone on record time and time again to say that his films were strongly inspired by the visual insanity of Twin Peaks. Hell, there's Laura Palmer herself, Cheryl Lee, as Chris Maloney's Rebound. She's only there for like the last 30 minutes of the film, and boy does she look like she doesn't want to be there. Honestly, I wouldn't be impressed too if I knew that I was hooking up with the imaginary detective from If. At the end of the day, I'm sorta half and half on this. While I do appreciate Araki for going in a somewhat new direction than what he usually does, it could have been so much more. The pieces are there to make a scary souffle of abstract nonsense, and I can see a really great movie being made out of that, but it just doesn't use the ingredients to its utmost advantage for no absolute reason. I'm not saying that we need another mysterious skin, just come on, just give me something to work with here. Also, Cocktail Twins? Really? Are you really going to tease that this is going to be anything like the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy and immediately backpedal on it for the rest of the movie? At least Kaboom was honest with how much it takes from those movies, and you can't even deliver on that? Pathetic. In conclusion, White Bird in a Blizzard is a movie with really delicious looking cookies. I had a pretty difficult time choosing whether or not I preferred this over White Bird, but who am I kidding? This has one of John Waters' proteges, Mink Stoll, the casting director. Of course I'm gonna choose this one. Splendor is interesting, I guess. The most I could say about it is that it's kinda like if a Liquid Guadagnino movie was covered in LSD. But at the same time, there's only so many times I could talk about how 90s everything is, or that it's automatically a better bisexual movie than Challengers because it doesn't have rejected Smile cast member Zendaya in it. She was only 4 at the time, I have my limits, okay? What I will briefly talk about here though are the performances, because I gotta be honest, they are probably the most interesting part of the whole film. The premise for this whole movie is that a random girl doesn't know which man she wants to hook up with, so she decides to date the both of them. Typical shenanigans-y type of stuff. But the 3 leads here play them with such passion and sincerity that it makes the film's corny premise somehow believable. At least to an extent. It's kinda like Twilight in a way. And if Edward and Jacob were called Abel and Zed, okay, it would still suck, but at least Araki would be able to sue the books out of existence. And who knows, that might be the happy ending somehow. Also, who keeps giving Gregg Araki the free reign to direct the most kick-ass and awesome parties in film history? Is that why nobody ever comes to my parties, because this guy keeps stealing them? I wonder if those invitations went through. Even with that, I am very happy with how this turned out, Mr. Araki, and I give the film a solid 7 out of 10. Even though I might be seeing you in court very soon. Those are my party guests, Matt. Why do you have to do that to me like that? Doom Generation! Now we're getting into the really fun territory. If the other 2 movies in the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy represent the nuances of the 90s, this movie most definitely represents the anarchy. It's without a doubt Araki at his most nihilistic, but at the same time, he has so much fun with how creatively dark this film can get sometimes. With moments I find to be really comfy, like the designs of some of the locations, like this weird dinosaur drive-thru and this red room that kind of looks like it's straight out of a one-car Y flick, to the hilariously over-the-top stuff like the cashier's death at the beginning, to some moments that are just plain unpleasant to watch, like the surreal epileptic Nazi finale, and coincidental dead dog. Not mine, though. My one has a lot of purpose. How long should this bit go on for? Outside of those 2 scenes that I want to excavate from my mind as soon as possible, it is still a really enjoyable movie, but it's probably the one in the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy that I have the least interesting stuff to say about. The tone of these movies kind of remind me of Douglas Copeland, who I'm definitely not a big fan of. This all cost me a nickel. The Living End is Araki's first proper feature film, and I know that this is going to sound strange considering where this is ranked, but this is practically my dream movie. Comfy beach-like aesthetic, casual conversations, surreal deaths, and even relatability with the realization that you screwed up on something and all you type into the script is fuck, 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 fuck! Even from the beginning, Araki knew the key to my heart. You almost make it too easy, man. I would go on, but let's face it, if you want to truly impress me, Make a movie where a stoned Anna Faris is trying to get rid of a copy of the Communist Manifesto.
But I'm gonna get you high today. Cause it's Friday, you ain't got no job, and you ain't got shit to do.
It's spring again. Everybody knows it's spring again. Oh, God, I'm recording. I've never really considered myself as a huge Anna Faris fan. Like, she can be funny, but she always seems to choose scripts that completely waste her in some way. But this isn't just any other Anna Faris movie. No, this is Smiley Face, one of the funniest stoner comedies to come out in the last 3 decades. Honestly, if you ask me what the Mount Rushmore of stoner comedies are, I would say Friday, Dazed and Confused, Smiley Face, and just anything could fill up that 4th slot, honestly. The whole thing is utter chaos. The editing, the acting, the camera work, that Beavis and Butthead looking intro. It's like if the only way to make a proper stoner comedy is if everyone on set was stoned. It's so packed with energy and it's just so fun and weird and entertaining and whatnot that it just makes you wanna... I swear, I always seem to get a contact high every time I watch this movie from beginning to end. 1 second is fairly normal, at least for this movie standards, and then as soon as you blink, she's running from the police trying to hide a copy of the Communist Manifesto that she blindly purchased online. This was the kind of off the rails I was really hoping from Araki. Like, I know this didn't get the best reception when it first came out because it was just so different from his other works, but this was before Kaboom, where his films sort of became a parody of themselves, so I could give it a little bit of wiggle room. I honestly wouldn't mind if I saw more screwball comedies like this from him if it meant that they were just as or even more surreal than Smiley Face was. Overall, I like this movie and I highly recommend it. That was the most boring thing I have ever said. When you agreed, giant wiggly tree. Yeah. I would have figured. Oh no! I'm late! It's okay, I'll wait. Go! Please? Aliens. Mysterious Skin is a movie. Mysterious Skin is a movie that kind of intimidated me for the longest time. Not just because it's seen as Araki's best movie by far, but also his most controversial, tackling the topics of homophobia, mental health, and sexual abuse of all ages. And trust me, this is kind of like the Gummo situation in my Harmony Korine ranking, where the end of it just left me sad and stressed and debating on if I should continue with the ranking because it tackles stuff that I don't want to get into because it would grind the video's pacing to a rough standstill. But hey, I'll try and explain my views on it as best as I can without spoiling too much, alright? The film is primarily about trauma and the longevity of how it affects people's lives. And the way everything is handled here strips that whole "it's just a movie" shield completely bare. None of it is sugar-coated. None of it is dumbed down for a more mainstream audience. The film itself was so explicit with how it tackles everything that it garnered itself an NC-17 rating. The same rating as Man Bites Dog, Female Trouble, Santa Sangre, and David Cronenberg's Crash. It is a violently honest movie in every sense of the word with how a single traumatic experience could ruin your entire life, especially when something as harmless as a silly little crush can be easily exploited by the worst possible people. That coach is going to haunt my dreams until the day I die. Oh yeah, Michelle Trachtenberg is also in this. You know, just in case I wasn't depressed enough. Girl was only 39. That is way too young of an age to go. Rest in peace, Penny. Rest in peace. I will say, though, that this movie tackles that sort of extreme childhood trauma really, really well. Like, it's really disturbing, don't get me wrong, but it's tackled with a sense of careful respect, and everyone delivers it in a brutally real manner. On a much lighter note, though, Brian is played by Brady Corbett. And if you're wondering why that name sounds so familiar, he would go on to direct the 2024 cinematic The Brutalist, a masturbatory 3.5 hour movie about stereotypical architecture and the second most controversial Best Picture nominee of the 2025 Oscars outside of Emilia Perez. So does this mean that Mysterious Skin is now hilarious in hindsight? No. Well, you know what? Enough's enough. I think it's time for me to shoot myself.
Addicts are like children. Sometimes they need tough love.
Nowhere is the most uncomfortable comfort movie I have ever seen. I was kind of skeptical at first if I was going to like this, considering how universally loved it is, but nah, they were right, man. If you ask me, this is without a doubt the Gregg Araki film. Themes of bisexuality, warped locations, a dark, downright surreal sense of humor, all packaged with this dry wit of several characters on the verge of nihilism, written and shot in a way that only Araki would be able to do.
Do you believe in God?
I don't believe in anything.
I mean, sure, at times it does come off as if the movie itself is lecturing the audience on current social issues, but it's done in a way that's very otherworldly and almost satirical in a sense. In a way, it goes to show how destructive the 90s really was. Similar to the 80s, the 90s are often romanticized as this perfect utopia where anything could happen. And those who think that way accuse the modern generation for being bratty, self-absorbed, and trigger-happy, which, I mean, they're not wrong, we all keep giving these people a career for crying out loud. But nowhere perfectly drives home the point that we all just equally suck, just in different ways. So it's only fitting that next to nobody in this movie gets a happy ending. Even Egg. Poor girl didn't deserve half the shit she got for most of this. Oh, there's also an alien in this movie that goes around abducting people. He seems cool. And just like many movies that take a slice out of life, there is some overarching goal that stitches everybody's paper thin plots together. They all want to go to a party hosted by a guy named Juji Fruit. And honestly, I can see why. It's a pretty bitchin' party. A lot of neon lights everywhere, it looks less like a house and more like a hall of mirrors you would find at Carnival, a whole load of drugs. This looks awesome, I wouldn't mind tagging along. Also, a bit of a side note, even after watching this movie several times at this point, I always seem to forget that most of the people who starred here went on to or already had prosperous careers. James Duval, Rachel True, Chiara Mastroianni, Christina Applegate, John Ritter, Denise Richards, Scott Caan, Gibby Haynes, John Anos III, Tracy Lords, Rose McGowan, Shannon Doherty, Beverly D'Angelo. These are some surprisingly big names for a movie that looks like it was filmed over a weekend. Hell, even that freaky rapture girl Alyssa is played by Jordan Dunn, the girl that played one of the people pestering Laura Dern in Inland Empire. Kind of fitting that an actress of my current director ranking also just so happens to be in the movie of my next director ranking. Spoiler alert, I'm covering David Lynch next. But hey, you should always keep a close eye on things when it comes to Gregg Araki. The guy is a nutter in the best possible way. He was way ahead of the curve with all the subjects he tackles, and always does it in a way that feels cozy on the surface, but starts to get a little more uncanny as it goes on. He's kinda like the John Waters of the 90s, but scary. And in a time where the most recent Waters movie was Serial Mom, we really needed someone out there to bring the weird back into the limelight. I mean, when you come to think about it, with films as bonkers as these, what more do you really want?
I'm out of here.
On a second thought, let's not go with the 90s. It is a scary place.
No, I'm still here. No, it's not that. It's just, there's no cars in sight, but I just can't bring myself to break the law. I'm sorry.